Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Namaduhu wa nasalli ala Rasul al-Kareem. Viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This video is in response to the video I saw yesterday titled Secular Pakistan is How Realistic is That? This video raises many questions and needs a response because it can be easily misleading. One of the things which is said in this video is that Europe made progress because it turned to secularism. It rejected the church, it rejected Christianity, and it started progress in the material sense. So the argument that's being made is that if Pakistan also turns away from Islam, turns towards secularism, it will make progress. And just like the priests in Europe were an impediment, an obstacle in the path of progress, the Maulvis and the Muftis, people like that are an impediment, an obstacle in the path of progress. And that's why Pakistan or the Muslims are so backward. This is a very common, familiar theme that goes on in Pakistani and other Muslim countries, that the reason why Muslims are backward is because they have stuck to Islam, and as long as they stick to Islam, they will remain backward. And the example they give is of Europe, where the church was rejected and Europeans, the Western people, turned to secularism. The big problem with this kind of argument is that the Christian religion, which is based on the teachings of the church, is so much against the science. So many things have been disproved in the Bible, and the result was that the Europeans, the intelligent, educated Europeans, thought that the whole religion is an opiate of the people, as Karl Marx said, and needs to be rejected. But keep in mind that Europe was familiar with only two religions. One was Judaism and the other was Christianity. And both these religions were based on the Bible. And when the Europeans discovered so many errors in the Bible, so many things that have been disproved by science, they rejected religion altogether. In other words, they threw the baby out with the bathwater. Instead of looking at the proper scriptures, which of course they were not familiar with. This is the first time in history that Islam has entered into the Western world. Islam went as far as Spain, but after having been there for centuries, there was a reversal. And the Europeans who came later on were not familiar with the teachings of Islam and not familiar with the Quran. And now, for the first time in history, the Western people are becoming acquainted with the Quran, and they're finding out that all the things mentioned in the Quran, not one of things has been disproved by science. And as the scholars say, 80% of the Quran has been proved to be true by science. Things that were discovered later on by scientists were already there in the Quran. And that shows that the scripture could not have come from any other source than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the remaining 20%, they say, is something that will be confirmed later on. But logically speaking, the fact that 80% has already been proved to be true by science, has been established, is an amazing fact. And this is making Europeans Western people look at religion in a very different way for the first time. And it's not surprising that millions of people in Europe and America, Canada, in the Western world are coming to Islam because they had been taught that religion is all nonsense. All this belief system is based on superstition and people's imagination. But now, scholars, scientists, European scientists, Western scientists like Dr. Maurice Bucaille, the French doctor who wrote a book called The Bible, the Quran, and Science, in which he has mentioned so many ayat, verses of the Quran, which have been proved to be true by science. So this, unfortunately, many Pakistanis and many Muslims, the so-called educated people, are not familiar with that. And they are so much mesmerized by the progress in the Western world that they think that the only way to make progress is through rejection of Islam. It is a fact of history that when Muslims were sticking to Islam, they were practicing Islam, they made progress. And we know from the history in Spain and other parts of the world where they were faithful to the faith, they were making progress. While when they started abandoning that, they started deviating from the teaching of the Quran and turning towards secularism, as this video seems to be advocating, then the destruction started. We know from the example of Turkey, when Turkey started drift towards secularism, it just became one of the many countries from a great empire under the Islamic rule. It became one of the many countries, one of the poor countries in Europe. So much so that even a new country like Pakistan is ahead of Turkey, which was a big, huge empire in terms of its military. Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and Turkey, even till this day, does not have that military strength. So that tells you something about secularism in the Muslim world. Whenever secularism started in other religions like Hindus and Christians and Buddhists, people like that, it liberated them from their belief system, which was not based on authentic scriptures. But when Muslims turned away from the authentic scriptures, when they turned away from the authentic scriptures, then they brought destructions upon themselves. So we have to look back and see where the problem is. The impression given by the video is that the problem is the Maulvis, the Muftis, and people who are religious, and they are responsible for the decline. Whereas the fact is that Pakistan has been secular from the very beginning. Another misconception, another wrong thing in the video impression in the video is that Pakistan is moving towards secularism. The fact is that Pakistan has never been Islamic right from the start. It has been secular, and it may be moving towards Islam, but we don't see enough evidence of that, because most people are like the person who's making this video, who think that progress will come by turning towards secularism. And when they see building of the temple and things like that, they think Pakistan is now becoming a secular state. Whereas Pakistan has always been a secular state and has resisted Islamic movement. This is the tragedy. All the Pakistani leaders have faced disgrace, humiliation, because they've turned away from Islam. The supposedly the most Islamic leader of Pakistan, General Ziaul, even he was not able to do very much because the whole establishment was secular. His his team uh, had total secular leanings, and when he was when he was not there, it's just a matter of a few months. The whole thing went back to where it was before. So Pakistan has not really experienced an Islamic government, which one can call a purely Islamic government. And that's because of the educational system in Pakistan is such, it's not allowing an Islamic government. It's not allowing an Islamic society. And the indoctrination that's going on among the so-called educated people is that Islam needs to be rejected. Unfortunately, they are not seeing the trends in Europe, in societies, in countries like Japan and Australia, and that the educated people are beginning to realize that secularism, while it has brought material progress, it has devastated the lives of millions of people. Millions of people are living just like animals. They have no direction. They don't have any peace of mind. They're working like machines.
Personal opinion है जिससे आपको
They're working just like robots, and they get exhausted, under working under stress. Suicides are very high. The highly advanced countries are experiencing personal problems, depression, alcoholism, drug abuse. Unfortunately, the Pakistani people do not know the realities of these countries. They think that everything is going fine. They look at the buildings, they look at the structures, they look at the roads, bridges, technology, and they are amazed and they are fascinated, and they think this is the way, but they don't know what's happening with the lives of the people. The rate, the divorce rate, the child abuse, the personal problems, uh, people living in misery. They may have all the material things, but their lives are so miserable they end up committing suicide with all the things. One can understand a poor person committing suicide because he has nothing, but to see why a person who has all the means, who has all the resources, he gets so depressed and kills himself. So the people who have lived in poverty, like the people in Pakistan, they cannot understand this phenomena. They have never seen anything like that. People who live in the Western countries, who live in these so-called advanced countries, they experience this every day. They see the depression, the family life is so messed up. There's uh, so much misery. And this part, of course, is of no concern to the so-called uh, educated people who are just one tracked. All they look at is is the uh, is the material side, with the result that they are completely misleading the people who are not aware of the realities. So it's very important that the public knows that things are not as good as these videos may give the impression. They are just looking at the one side, uh, which is uh, which is promoted by the media and by the atheistic culture, the fun culture, that they they think this all the paradise will come on this earth by turning to technology and science and rejecting religion. This is the misconception, and people in the West already know that, but people in Pakistan don't know that because they suffer from so much poverty and misery. They only think in terms of what they see in the media, and they are dreaming of golden days. If Islam is rejected, then all the good things will start happening, and, and progress will come. Unfortunately, even the politicians, the Pakistani politicians, most of them have the same kind of thinking. Where they get into power and they start aping, they start imitating the Western ways, thinking progress is going to come. Even the so-called Western educated people, they think the same thing. People like Imran Khan, who spent a few years in the West, but he stayed there as a celebrity. He never really worked. He never did a job. He didn't live like an ordinary Western person. So he has no idea what the Western society is like. He was a celebrity and he was given VIP treatment everywhere he went. So he doesn't know the ground realities. He thinks everything in the West is great, and all we have to do is import those things into Pakistan, and things will be fine. So his mindset is that religion has nothing to do with progress. That religion is fine as far as personal beliefs go. But this is not going to solve. In the case of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not grant success to Muslims if they reject Islam, because Muslims have been given the responsibility to bring the message to all mankind. And if they do not do that, they will be going through the same tragedies, the same destruction that the Muslims went through during the time of the Mongols, how Baghdad was destroyed, how Muslims were massacred, because they forgot the teachings of the Quran, they forgot the teachings of Rasulullah Sallallahu, and started copying the people who they thought were successful. This is a very dangerous trend. And unless the Muslims understand this, they will keep on making this mistake. Pakistan has made this for the last 73 years, almost 73 years. And we don't see any change happening because the establishment, the army, the civil service, bureaucracy, the judiciary, all of them have this kind of thinking that Islam is not a way to make progress. It is a personal thing. It doesn't have answers to the questions or the misery of the people. Rasulullah brought a complete system which was put into practice. The Quran is not a book that tells you about beliefs. It tells you about how to live your life, how to be successful. And when you look at the social media, the comments people make, who are basically ignorant people who don't even know even about the material world. They don't know anything about Islam and they don't know anything about the material world, but they learn a few things here and there, and they think that the way to make progress is to just copy the Japanese model or the Chinese model or the American model, the European model, and that's the way to go. But they don't understand what goes on in the lives of the Japanese and the Chinese and the Americans and the Europeans. They look at their lives from the outside. They seem like very happy people. They seem to be having a lot of fun. They don't understand that most of these people live in, even with all the resources, they are so miserable that millions of them are on anti-depression drugs, and they have to be constantly uh, getting into some kind of drug use or alcohol or something to keep themselves away from stress. So I hope the Muslims in Pakistan and other countries don't fall into that trap. This is a trap of the shaitan, that this happiness will come. This is a big misconception that these people who are considered very progressive and advanced, that they are successful or they are happy. They they are not happy as they appear to be to people who have no contact. Even people like Imran Khan, who's lived in the West, he has a very superficial understanding of these people because he just met them uh, on a on a professional level. He has not lived with the common people. He has lived with the elite, with the most privileged people, and he thinks that every person in the street is like that. So this gives a wrong impression. And unfortunately, the leaders of Pakistan have come from privileged families and privileged backgrounds, and they've only had contact with people of privilege, and they think the whole society is like that. If they had lived with the common people and they know what the common people are going through, the problems, then they would think differently. So it's very important for the common man to understand and not to be misled by videos like that. وآخر دعوانا إن الحمد لله رب العالمين.